So I just ended up with a wolf spider, and the story of how is kind of funny. While making dinner last week, I was startled by my wife screaming from the other side of the house. I promptly ran to the bathroom to see what was going on, and peeking out from under the radiator was none other than a large wolf spider. With mutual respect, we stared each other down for what seemed like minutes. However, I looked away for 2 seconds to grab something to corral it in, and as I returned my gaze, it was gone. That was until I got a snap from my wife a few days later. This time I was quick to act. I got a container and a piece of paper and ran upstairs. With a proper plan in place, I wasn't being outsmarted again. Upon closer inspection, I could see that its abdomen was fairly skinny. Chances are it emerged from under the radiator to find prey. Needless to say, I gave it a cricket. It wasn't interested at first, but when I returned the following day, virtually nothing remained, and it appeared thicker. Also, I believe it's most likely a male Hogna aspersa. Since this spider was insistent on living in my house, I decided why not give him a suite in the animal room so he could continue doing so. He'd be a great fit actually because I was already working on a dedicated invertebrate area, and I even had a 10-gallon aquarium ready to go. It was intended for something else, but I have the spider now, so plans changed. You know how I do things. I had to get in there and modify the enclosure to fit the vision. I converted it more or less the same way I did for the rubber ducky isopods, just on a larger scale. The bottom frame wasn't needed, so I removed it. I'll also actually orient the tank on its front like this to get more floor space. However, I had to remove the piece of glass that would become the top. I also scraped out the beads of silicone from the inside of the tank. I took measurements from the space between, and luckily I had a scrap of glass on hand that was nearly a perfect fit. I just had to cut off the side. I took this down to 3 pieces, sanded the edges, rinsed off debris, and they were ready to go. Of course, I taped off the edges for the silicone, but I also turned the cardboard packaging into spacers for the door section. I applied silicone for the substrate tray first. Then I taped the door above this and attached the other piece. I had to fix the seal from before as well to keep it waterproofed. I don't want the spider to end up in my house again, so this needs a lid. More specifically, one with ventilation. I attempted to do that by cutting out the middle of the glass I removed before. Drilling holes in the corners, scoring the glass, and using the tool allowed me to do this. However, it's no doubt one of the top 10 worst cuts, and there's a crack on the back. Regardless, it will work, it's just not pretty. I simply applied silicone along the top edge and dropped the glass in place. Additionally, I applied more along the cut opening to secure the window screen. While the silicone cured, I addressed the wooden components. After cutting them to size and installing magnets on the door segments, I used the Shosugi bond technique to finish the wood. With a butane torch, I completely charred the exterior of the wood. This not only gives a pseudo-stained appearance, but it helps preserve the wood as well. A quick sanding removed excess char, and they were good to go. With the silicone now cured, I removed the excess screen, pulled off the tape, and scraped away any unwanted bits. A self-leveling mat was installed on the bottom as well. I then stuck the boards to the front with silicone, resulting in a clean and seamless look. That meant I could finally get things going on the inside. I wanted to complete this as quickly and simply as possible. That's why I decided to make the background out of compressed cork tiles. Although not naturalistic, they look good, are cheap, and easy to install. I cut them down to get a perfect fit. Then I applied small dabs of silicone to the backs. This is usually enough to hold them in as is. However, the back is comprised of 2 panels. Because of that, I had to weigh them down with bricks while the silicone cured. Again, they're not naturalistic per se, but it's better than bare glass in my opinion, and will complement other elements quite well. Keeping with simplicity again, I just dropped in a few sheets of fine filter sponge to create the false bottom. This will retain the substrate as is, but I wanted the layered look in the front. That's why I filled the remainder of the void with sand, which will do the same thing and look better. Sprinkling charcoal on top of this layer will help keep things clean and stable. On the other hand, the substrate is a blend of topsoil, coco fiber, tree fern fibers, sand, and bentonite clay. Well, actually this is natural clay cat litter, but it's made completely from bentonite clay. This will help retain any burrows the spider may create. Anyway, this is how it looked when mixed together, and as you can see, holds a burrow quite well. I established a base layer or foundation to work off of. I wanted to build the skate primarily off of this single piece of driftwood, which is too big for the tank. Funny enough, this originated from Samson's old setup that I reworked earlier this year, and is a prime example of what I said in the hardscape video. On what pieces to invest in. And I say invest because a lot of these pieces I've had for 10 plus years, if not longer. So when you buy these things, you can constantly reuse them over and over and over and over again. So it is kind of an investment. It's not a one-time thing. Hardscape definitely can carry over from build to build if you take time to reimagine it. In this instance, I had to cut off a section which I can use for something else. There was also unsightly mineral buildup that I cleared away with the pressure washer. All of that moss washed away as well, but it likely wouldn't have returned to life anyway. Regardless, it cleaned up nicely and was perfect for this setup. With it, I created layered terraces to visually break up the landscape and account for various microclimates. I just had to prop up the branch with small stones and backfill behind it with more substrate. Additional stones helped retain the substrate and add interest. At this point, the scape looked pretty good and included a lot of usable features, like a deep substrate high ground in the back, a crevice under the wood to hide in, and an expansive foreground for movement. Although it will likely burrow on its own, I wanted to get it started. I made a few shallow holes in locations where I could actually view the spider, although I'm not sure if it will even use them. I was able to truly bring it to life from here with the plants, which I cleaned prior to use. First was a lemon button fern, which I nested in damp sphagnum moss to retain water, which will also create a humid pocket around the base. I did the same for this Pilea involucrata, which has an awesome texture, and a Cryptanthus nubicola, while this regal Phytonia argyronera looked great in the background. The plants alone looked awesome, but the details truly made it shine. Luckily I had roots left over from the isopod setup, which were perfect for this. Following the direction of the driftwood made for an incredible layout. No setup like this would be complete without moss either. I placed tree moss near the front, which looks incredible. Other varieties elsewhere added pops of green and texture. Leaf litter and botanicals were a must as well. I placed miscellaneous leaves throughout, followed by a few trumpet pods. I felt like these made sense because they could create additional hiding places. And even though I liked how this all looked, it suffers from one issue. The scale is off. More specifically, the leaf litter looks weird because it's all larger stuff. I realize that's primarily how it would be in nature, but the thing about scale is that it's all dictated by reference to adjacent objects. This is a small space, and there aren't trees or other large things like there would be outside. Anyway, adding these smaller leaves made it appear more cohesive. I also remembered seeing acorn caps in my yard, which looked perfect in here. They even doubled as mini water bowls. I figured why not add some alder cones as well. After all of that, I just had to install the door with hinges and a handle. Again, magnets keep the door locked when closed, so the spider isn't going anywhere. And the completed design looked really cool to me. A little slice of the forest, which is one of the many habitats where you could expect to see a wolf spider. Better than in your bathroom, that's for sure. I especially enjoy how the forest floor came together with various burrows and textures of the plants. All of that is made better by taking a step back to get the full perspective. Anyway, after adding the cleanup crew, which consisted of Springtails and isopods, it was time for Toby to enter his new forest home. Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that my wife named him Toby because she was more than glad to see him go away. If you know, you know. I let him take in the surroundings for about a half hour before adding crickets. Immediately he was on high alert as he calculated what to do. It didn't take long for the cricket to enter the land of no return, and it was done in a matter of seconds. Toby made his way up to a safe spot under one of the plants where he quietly ate his catch. I put on the time-lapse to capture his movements from here, and over the next several hours he sat still, enjoying his meal while the adult isopods did laps. It wasn't until about 3 or 4 hours later that he decided to move to a higher location in the Phytonia. where he stayed put nearly 12 hours later. I've kept all sorts of animals over the years, but I've done minimal work with inverts. You've seen my jumping spider and ghost mantis, which are both no longer with us, and my isopods, of course. I thoroughly enjoyed working with all of those, so I'm excited to see what's next with this wolf spider. I've only had him for a few days now, and I'm already invested in seeing him thrive. That said, I don't know for how long it will be since they don't have long lifespans. Regardless, I'll have the setup at that point, so it could always have something else alongside the isopods, which by the way are probably too big and armored to be preyed upon. As I'm sure you gathered, I had no intention on making this video or keeping another spider anytime soon, but it all just kind of happened, so I figured why not. Truthfully, I'm not really a spider guy, but I find myself becoming increasingly fascinated with pretty much all wildlife these days, even if it's not far from home.